Alright everybody, welcome back to the next stage in the video. This is going to be completely separate, and in this part we're going to do decals. Now this is going to be separate basically because decals take probably the most amount of time of any individual step in doing the model, and it is the most finicky, and so I'm going to do this from start to finish. We're going to do one decal, probably on the shoulder pad or maybe on the knee pad, something nice and big so you can see. So the things you're going to need: you're definitely going to need some water. This is a little bit warm water, maybe like lukewarm or a little bit more than just cold water, something medium temperature. You're going to need some tweezers for sure. You're going to want to need these because you're going to need to hold on to the decal. Something pointy and not flat is more helpful, so you have something like this with a pointed edge. It's a lot better. The needle here that I have, or just a pin, is helpful to maneuver the decal once you've gotten it on. This is just for precise movements, which you could use. Optional things are setting solutions. I have the Mr. Mark softener and setter solutions here, which I don't tend to use, but I do have. And I use primarily the MicroSol and MicroSet series of decal setting and solution agents. Now these, again, both these things are optional. You can do decals without setting solutions, but I just use them because I find it really gives a good painted on look. You're also going to need something to cut the decals out with. I just got my knife here. And then you'll need a decal sheet. So just as an example, I've got this here. This is from the first iteration of the World Eater decal sheet, Legion decal sheet from Forge World. Really quick, before we get into actually doing it, there is something to note here. And I've got a bit of an example as usual. The back of the paper is probably what you can see best. Now you can probably tell these are a slightly different color from one another. This right-hand set is the newer set, and it's basically a more clean color, and this left-hand set is a more blue, sort of faded color. Now, both of these have, and all decals in general, have a bit of nuance to them. Sometimes they do well longer in water, sometimes they do well longer for setting, sometimes shorter. It really just depends on what decals and what companies you're using them from. Like, the better quality decals you get, the less prone they are to tearing or to melting or to leaving silvering lines, which we'll get into later. But just use your first time doing decals. If you're not using setting solutions, if you're just going to go straight into water, I would just do one of the decals on a less conspicuous part of the model, somewhere where you're not going to see it, just as an example to kind of get a feel of how they're going to work for the rest of the miniatures you're going to do and for the rest of the decals. So kind of do a practice one just to see how it's going to work. And then, as I've done before, the step before this, I went ahead and sprayed this completely with my floor polish, which works extremely well, the Pledge multi-surface floor polish stuff. I've got a little pot of it just here, just so that I can do, after we put the decals on, we'll put it over to seal them in. So as you can see, and especially now that the light is hitting the top, it's much shinier. The colors have darkened slightly, because when you hit stuff with a gloss coat, you will darken them down. But when we come back later with the matte coat, we'll get rid of the shininess effect, and we'll brighten the colors back up with that cover of varnish. So let's go ahead and begin. First thing you're going to want to do is cut out yourself a decal, and then we'll go from there. Alrighty, we've got ourselves a decal cut out. This is our 12th Legion numerical, basically. Now that you've got the decal cut out and you got yourself a real good grip with some sharp tweezers, you're basically just want to really easily set it in the water and just let them chill for a little bit. As I mentioned before, some decals will need more time in the water than others. These are the newer ones, and so the newer set takes quite a long time. So once you've got your decal in the water, if it starts to curl up, so sometimes you'll get actually you can see on the sheet itself, sometimes you'll get a curling of the actual paper. You can kind of see there, especially on the other side. It sort of wants to curl in on itself. As soon as it touches the water, it will do that a lot more. These ones, again, are the new set, so they're not really bothered by that. But if they do tend to curl up and they curve over, flip it over and kind of just push it down lightly just to keep it straight, and then let it soak for as long as it needs to. And once it starts moving, which these, again, are the newer set, they're going to take quite a bit of time. Once you can move it real lightly with the tip of your tweezers, or with your, if you have one of those needles that I have just off camera here, if you have a needle from like Dental Tools, like I got these from eBay Dental Tools for super cheap, or you can get wax carving tools, basically the same thing for super cheap. As soon as you can start moving it around, then it's ready to place. Okay, now once your decal has set long enough and he is moving freely, so if I grab the tweezers You can just see that it's moving, sliding around on the piece of paper, the backing film there. Once it's moving free, you're welcome to go on to the next step. So basically what you're going to want to do is get the transfer from the paper onto the part of the miniature that you're working on. Now really quickly, I'm going to slide this into my holder just because it'll make this a little bit easier. And in my case, I like to use micro set. This is part of a two-step process to get decals to kind of melt onto surfaces and make them look painted on. Although, however, I did mention before, you do not need to do this step. You can just use regular water and then just use GW makes Ard coat, or you can use whatever gloss you want, or if you don't even want to use gloss, that's up to you. So I've got a little bit of the micro set here. And basically all I'm going to do is apply it to the knee pads that you can just see there. I'm just going to wipe a little bit of this on. And basically what this is going to do, the first step, the micro set, is going to help melt the decal just a little bit and then help it adhere to the actual surface. We're going to check one more time. That's moving great. This is what takes a little bit of experience, and this is going to be a little bit difficult because I'm doing this through a lens. So you're going to set the decal down nearby, roughly nearby, like even that's fine right now, to be honest. Set it down and then really carefully push down. Usually I push down with my finger. Push down and hold and pull the decal paper away. So now that it's on there, this is where it's going to get super finicky. How close can I get this? There we go. So now that it's on there, you can sort of maneuver it into place. Now, normally I use my needle, but since I got the tweezers here, no problem. Real light, easy movements, nothing crazy. You want to tear the film. These ones are actually really good quality decals, so it's going to be kind of hard to tear the decal film. But there you go. He's pretty much, if I can get that to super macro focus, maybe. There we go. He's pretty much in place like that. Now the film, as you can see, is kind of leaving a bit of its stuff, its actual backing film kind of hanging over. We're not worried about that. We can come back later and cut that. Basically what I'm going to do is grab yourself a Q-tip, kind of push it down into place. See how close I can get that same thing. It looks not terrible, but basically you're just going to tap it real lightly. Do not push, do not pull. You're just squeezing out the remainder of the water and the actual setting solution. I'm just going to go far away, see if I can do that real quick. Sorry for playing a bit of cameraman. That's actually much better. And so you're real lightly tapping it. Don't drag and don't roll it, not quite anyways. You're just basically collecting the excess of water and, in my case, setting solution. If he moves around a little bit, no problem. Reach over, grab my needle. This is really what that's good for. And stick him into place. Looks actually quite good. It's actually nice using the camera because I can really see how it's going to look in the end. So now that's all pretty much adhered onto and it's in place. So for the final time for the cotton bud or for the Q-tip, start to really push down. Make sure that there's no air underneath, and that's a big part of this. If you leave air underneath the decal when you're applying it, it'll lead to a nasty problem called silvering. So now that that's set basically and in place, I'm going to grab the other solution. This is called Micro Sol. And basically what this is going to do is this is really going to melt it into place. So grab my brush just like before. Just touch a little bit off camera. Now you don't want this to be super wet because if it's too wet, it'll actually drag the decal up. And so I'm rubbing off just a little bit onto the mat. And then real lightly over the entire decal. Make sure you get the film that's kind of overhanging because it'll help melt that and we can melt that into place. So now it's got Micro Sol underneath and Micro Set underneath and Micro Sol over top. And now basically what we're going to do is wait for that to start drying. And I've already done another one for an example basically. And if I can get me to focus, there we go. And basically what will happen is after a bit, it's a little bit shiny so it's hard to see. After a bit, the decal will wrinkle up a little bit. But as it wrinkles up, it's basically contracting and once it finishes contracting down, it'll smooth out real nicely. So as it wrinkles up, don't panic. That's supposed to happen if you use microsol and microset. If you're not using a setting solution, that stage doesn't really apply. But if you're following along and using what I'm using, let it wrinkle up, no problem. And then once it dries, you can apply another coat to really thin it out and really make sure it's flat and nice and adhered. And once it is, you're gonna come over with your last set of gloss coat, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm gonna go around the rest of the model, sticking on decals various places. I'm thinking about using stuff along the arms and this leg here. So I'll come back once I've got a lot of these decals done, and you'll see how it looks. Alrighty, so we're looking at completed decals basically for the entire figure. Get a good quick zoom. So we've got some basically some kill tallies kind of there at the very bottom on his leg. Got the 12 numerical for his Legion number, some more kill tallies on his forearm. You've got his nice big Legion numerical on his right shoulder pad and his unit markings. This is a little bit of a slight side note. If you're doing Space Marines, especially Pre-Heresy Space Marines, the right shoulder pad typically, among many of the Legions, denotes a unit type. So in this case, the arrows, the horizontal arrows, or in some cases a vertical arrow, a single vertical arrow, denotes a tactical squad. And the 12 generally denotes a unit or a subunit. So this just has a 12 for the 12th Legion World Eaters. The other shoulder pad, as we've already got, almost always denotes the actual Legion heraldry. So in this case, you have the stylized jaw biting onto a planet or a world. Now, when you do Space Marines Pre-Heresy, mostly among primarily, make sure you keep that in mind so that you get the unit markings correct. And so, as I said, the decals are done now. We just have one final step before we get to our next gloss coat. Grab yourself a cotton bud or a Q-tip, dip it in some clean water, roll a lot of the moisture out, so get a lot of that out. Just make sure it's nice and clean water, and go through and basically just wipe everything down. Don't go super hardcore and super heavy. Just get the excess moisture off. Sometimes the decal solutions sort of leave a little bit of a residue. Just clean that off. You don't have to go super crazy. Just make sure that it's nice and not sticky, because sometimes it might be a little sticky. Okay, so basically now I've gotten my hand technique down to straighten the focus out. So basically now we're all cleaned up and we're waiting for that to dry, and then once it is, just like before, we're going to come in, paint on a gloss coat. You could again use a brush for that if you're using the same floor shine polish stuff that I'm using, or if you're using Ard Coat, you can come in and use Ard Coat straight from the bottle. There's nothing wrong with that. In my case, I'm just going to brush it on really quickly over the decals anywhere that I put a decal, and then I'm going to come by and put through the airbrush my matte coat. Now my matte coat is Winsor & Newton's matte UV varnish. So basically this is an artist acrylic varnish that you use over paintings. However, I've been using it for 2 years now to do models, and it's really great, especially over white. So a lot of times white colors tend to yellow over time. I haven't had any problems with that so far in my entire miniatures collection thing and my hobbying years. However, I'm deathly afraid of it. And so basically, especially because my whole army is white, I'm really concerned with that stuff yellowing over time. And so this has got an anti-yellowing agent. It's got UV property or anti-UV properties into it. If you are going to use this stuff, I do tend to thin it down, and you need to shake the crap out of it. You need to absolutely shake the crap out of it. A lot of UV varnishes require the same. You really need to shake them, make sure that the different chemicals are mixed really correctly, or else you'll get frosting or you'll get other problems that you might find down the line. So this is just about dried up. Once it is, paint on a little layer of gloss, put the Winsor & Newton UV matte varnish through the airbrush, and then we're going to get to the rest of the model, which is going to be the shadows or the shading and the weathering. And then basically after the weathering, we're just going to do the base, and then we'll be calling this done. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope you're enjoying, and I'll see you in the next video.